May 2nd, 1945. The Soviet Army's red flag flies over Berlin. Helmut Weidling, the German general responsible for defending the city, surrenders. The Russians interrogate him, and he recounts Hitler's final moments, even imitating him. He was an utter mess. He was sitting on his chair, completely crushed. His hands were shaking like this on the map. He spoke in a barely audible voice, and from time to time, spittle came out of his mouth. He was a ravaged man. 1 year earlier, early 1944, in his chalet, the Berghof, Hitler struggles to regain strength. His companion, Eva Braun, continues to film him. We see her here on the bottom right, in the reflection, with her camera. She later comments, "I criticized him for standing so hunched over. He replied, 'It's because I'm carrying around a bag full of worries.'" For Hitler, the main threat is the Red Army and Marshal Zhukov. The Germans did not expect the huge defeat they suffered in Ukraine. Let our enemies not forget that our great Soviet people are united around Comrade Stalin as never before. So begins the fall of Hitler. Stalin's tanks move forward but are still far from the Reich. When Hitler returns to his headquarters at the Wolf's Lair, he is furious with the army generals, who he blames for these successive defeats. The generals, on the other hand, are more and more intent on overthrowing the Führer, who is leading Germany to disaster. How will Hitler face the final act of his tragedy? All across the front, the German army is on the defensive. The troops retreat to Ukraine after their terrible defeat at Cherkasy. Since January 44, 6 Wehrmacht divisions are surrounded, as in Stalingrad. The Germans are equipped for winter this time, but the Russians outnumber them 3-1. All desperate attempts to help them fail due to the mud. The snow. And the cold. Half of the besieged managed to escape, leaving behind 30,000 dead, wounded, or captive, and all the equipment of an army. But German propaganda transforms this defeat into victory. Hitler has himself filmed with a survivor of the Battle of Cherkasy. Belgian SS officer Leon de Grelle must take part in a wide-scale recruitment campaign in Belgium to combat the Russian guerrilla fighters. Hitler claims, in recent months, banditry in the East has assumed intolerable proportions. Hitler organizes de Grelle's triumphant return to Belgium, which inspires thousands of volunteers to enlist. The Nazis are short of men, and this army, recruited in a hurry throughout Europe in the name of the crusade against Bolshevism, lacks combat skills and falls short of the criteria for the Aryan race, as defined by SS chief Heinrich Himmler. In the aftermath of Stalingrad, thousands of young people from the Baltic states, 50,000 Romanians, and 30,000 Serbs joined the Hungarian, Dutch, Italian, and Norwegian SS, as well as the 7,000 to 8,000 French soldiers of the Charlemagne Division. Disturbing images of Frenchmen in German uniforms who salute the unknown soldier fallen during World War I, fighting against Germany. Most of these SS troops are sent to Russia, where medals come quickly and death even quicker. They combat the Russian resistance fighters, the partisans. These men are often Soviet soldiers who escaped from the encirclements and hid behind German lines. The SS comb the forests and destroy villages. But despite their brutality and cruelty, they can't slow the tide of Soviet guerrilla warfare, which spreads, paralyzing communications. 3 years after Barbarossa, the German invasion, 250,000 clandestine Soviet partisans are waging war in Russia's forests. The Soviet January Thunder Offensive has liberated Leningrad, under siege since 1941. The Red Army advances toward the Baltic states. Hitler tries to stop it by building a line of blockhouses in the east. In the west, he constructs the Atlantic Wall to prevent an Allied landing. Cannons, fortifications, and armies require millions of tons of steel, manganese, coal, and wheat. Hitler wants no more retreating and decides to set an example. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, one of the Reich's greatest warlords, is blamed by Hitler for abandoning territories that he considers essential to the German economy. Hitler relieves him of his command. He wants to be blindly obeyed. He becomes the leader again, the Führer. On April 20th, 1944, the propaganda services are mobilized on the Munich Autobahn to mark his 55th birthday and show off brand new, ultra-modern equipment. And to all the Nazi leaders who obsequiously congratulate him, he says, "I know what I want, and I shall fight for it." After the habitual birthday concert at the Berlin Opera House, propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels appeals to the German people. "We have devoted ourselves for a whole year to the Führer's work, with our diligence and bravery. On his birthday, we want to express our gratitude with words that come from the depths of our hearts. He must constantly know that he can count on his people. Even in this fight to the death, he is and will remain what he has always been to us, our Hitler." Berlin is in ruins, but Goebbels has this birthday celebrated here to show that Allied bombings had not weakened the Führer's resolve. The Hitler Youth must cover the ruins with swastikas and slogans like, "Our walls are broken, but not our hearts." Goering, the bloated Reich Marshal, head of the Air Force, drives through the disaster zone in a convertible, even though he had solemnly sworn that no enemy plane could ever fly over the Reich. However, in the spring of 1944, Germany is attacked by American bombers by day and the British by night. Their losses are terrible. Nearly 50 bombers, each with 10 crewmen, are shot down in each raid, like this Boeing B-17. Over the course of the war, 81,000 Allied airmen are killed. When they are lucky enough to be able to parachute down, German propaganda repeatedly shows them being captured. Hitler knows he is in trouble, but he does not deviate from his grand plan to annihilate the Jewish people. Himmler presents Hitler with a report by his deputy, SS Adolf Eichmann, which states, "In our various camps, some 4 million Jews have already been killed." Edith Brock, a Hungarian deportee and one of the Holocaust's greatest voices, testifies about her time in the barracks of Auschwitz. Every minute of every hour of every day, people died. One by selection, one during roll call, one from starvation, one from disease, and another by suicide, electrocuted on the barbed wire, hanging there forever, like Jesus Christ on the cross. One of the secretaries, Christa Schroeder, writes, "Hitler thought it was normal for the ashes of deportees burned in the crematoria to be used as fertilizer for the SS vegetable gardens." Far from all these horrors, Eva Braun surrounds herself with the children that Hitler did not want. Christa Schroeder recalls, "He stroked her arm endlessly, saying, 'My little rabbit.' He has a passion for the cinema, so she tries to resemble the stars from the films and shows intended to raise the morale of the Germans, who ventured between two alerts to the theaters that were still standing. Hitler also acts for Eva Braun's camera. Here in this shot, he perpetuates the legend, but those who meet him are not fooled. These famous pilots, lucky enough to return from the Russian hell, have just been decorated by the Führer. One of them recalls having the feeling of facing a madman when he heard Hitler hammer home, "Germany will either be a world power or will not be at all." But on April 22, 1944, when he meets with Mussolini, Hitler is more pessimistic. He doesn't lie about the catastrophic situation in the East and the failure of the submarines in the Atlantic. Mussolini later writes, "We are all on the same sinking ship." Hitler complains that the war in Italy monopolizes divisions that should be in Russia. But what can Mussolini do, with the last of his fascist soldiers being harassed by the Italian partisans? After landing in southern Italy, the Allies are blocked by the Germans, firmly retrenched around Monte Cassino. This rocky peak, topped by a monastery, was first demolished by Allied aircraft. German paratroopers occupied the ruins, turning them into a fortress. Allied troops take 4 months to capture Monte Cassino with the help of the French Expeditionary Corps soldiers who penetrate the German defense line. General de Gaulle, one of Hitler's fiercest opponents and the leader of the French resistance, wants to show everyone that his country is back in the war with these soldiers from France's African colonies, equipped with American equipment, weapons, and uniforms. De Gaulle bestows the military medal the highest decoration upon the future president of independent Algeria, Ahmed Ben Bella, for saving his wounded officer under enemy fire. At the time, Ben Bella is a sergeant major. General de Gaulle tells him, "And now, you shall liberate France." This army, also composed of free Frenchmen, pieds noirs, and troops from Africa, trained in Algeria before landing in the south of France in the summer of 1944. In Britain, more than 2 million troops from 12 different countries prepare for the invasion of France. More than 130,000 will embark for D-Day. But does Hitler know? He seems confident. For him, the Atlantic Wall should prevent the Allies from landing. He says, "They have 80 divisions poised for invasion. We need more flamethrowers, especially in defense. The flamethrower is one of the most terrifying things. It will scare the hell out of the enemy infantry before hand-to-hand combat. They will lose their nerve when they see they are surrounded by flamethrowers. There must be flamethrowers everywhere." On the agenda for June 3, 1944, 72 hours before the Allied landing, is the wedding of Eva Braun's sister, Gretel, to SS General Hermann Fegelein. Fegelein is responsible for the massacre of Jews on the Eastern Front. Wounded in the repression of the partisans, he has become Himmler's liaison officer to Hitler. An opportunist, he seduces Gretel Braun. Himmler, the most feared man in Germany, celebrates the wedding by offering the bride and groom wine, bread, and salt, according to old Germanic pagan tradition. Himmler favors this union, which will allow him to monitor Hitler closely. Eva Braun is also pleased about this marriage, which feels a bit like her own. She dreams of becoming Mrs. Adolf Hitler. Everyone celebrates on top of the mountain overlooking the Berchtesgaden Valley, a few miles from the Berghof. One must travel along a private road and through 5 tunnels to reach the foot of Hitler's mountain residence, the Eagle's Nest. Building this structure required 3,500 renowned stonemasons, mainly Italian, who toiled for 2 years. This feat cost the equivalent of 120 million euros. For the last 400-foot climb, an elevator has been drilled into the rock. Its speed gives Hitler palpitations. Pride stops him from going often, only to impress visiting heads of state. When Hitler is not around, Eva Braun and Gretel go up to the Eagle's Nest with their friends to smoke and sunbathe. Things usually forbidden by the Führer, who doesn't like tan skin. Eva Braun often invites her parents, Franziska and Friedrich Braun, a Catholic teacher, who would have preferred Eva to be married, but reaps the benefits from the situation. Back to June 3rd, 1944. Gretel is queen of the day. Himmler, a witness at her wedding, pampers her. Everyone crowds into the big elevator. Do these people realize that their world is about to disappear? That this is the last party? The SS provides the orchestra. Eva Braun opens the ball with the man who is now her brother-in-law. The party lasts 3 days. And on the morning of the third day, at 6:30 a.m., on June 6, 1944, the Allies land in France. As usual, Hitler has gone to bed very late. Nobody dares wake him to tell him this crucial news. On this fateful day, Hitler wakes up at noon. Everyone is on overdrive. Goering immediately shows him what he calls the invasion, the Normandy landing. General Jodl, the chief of staff, details the zones where fighting is going on. 5 beaches between Caen and Cherbourg. Hitler is convinced this is a diversion. The real landing will take place in the Pas de Calais, the northernmost part of France, which was heavily fortified and defended. He is confident. He says, "The news could not be better. As long as they were in Britain, we could not get at them. Now we have them where we can destroy them." One week after the Normandy landing on June 13, 1944, the Führer unveils his first secret weapon. The V-1 flying bomb, a small, unmanned aircraft carrying 1,800 pounds of explosives from the Pas de Calais to London, causing considerable damage. June 22, 1944, at the same time, in coordination with the Allies, the Russians launch their biggest offensive ever. 24,000 artillery pieces demolish the German lines. $2.5 million Russian soldiers with 5,000 tanks smash through the front. Now begins the retreat of the Wehrmacht. 400,000 of Hitler's soldiers are killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. This is the greatest defeat in the history of the German army. Will the Führer continue fighting? The front is getting dangerously close to the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's advanced headquarters. On July 20th, 1944, Hitler and his general staff are in a meeting room taking stock of the difficult situation. A bomb explodes. One of the officers present, Colonel von Stauffenberg, planted plastic explosives, killing 3 and hospitalizing 11. But not Hitler. Of the 40 or so separate plots to kill Hitler, this one perhaps came the closest to succeeding. And only a few hours later, under the rain and the cape that hides his wounds, he greets Mussolini. Hitler is happy to see him again, alive. He tells him, "They just unleashed a hellish machine against me." Hitler records a speech. He who is against religion thanks the heavens. "I am unharmed. I take this as confirmation of Providence's mandate to pursue my life's mission as I have always done." Mussolini has come to ask Hitler, whom he calls my old friend, for more military help. This is their 17th and final meeting. Hitler has himself filmed with the wounded. Even he is in shock. His eardrums are perforated. He cannot use his right arm. The conspirators are tried in a kangaroo court. Hitler says, "At last I've got the bastards who have been sabotaging my work for years. Now I know why my great plans for Russia have failed. Without these traitors, we would have won long ago." On Hitler's orders, the main accused, after being copiously tortured, are hung from butcher's hooks with piano wire to prolong the agony of strangulation. Late August 44, Hitler watches the latest newsreel showing General de Gaulle in liberated Paris. The commentary underlines the anarchy that reigns in the wake of the Germans' departure. Hitler had given the order to destroy the city. He's irate. He shouts, "Is Paris burning?" Choltitz, the German military governor, didn't carry out this order because he didn't have the means to do so. In September 1944, Hitler locks himself up in the gigantic bunkers he had built in each of his headquarters, like here at the Wolf's Lair. His secretary, Christa Schroeder, writes, "In this room's heavy atmosphere, his imagination flourished like a poisonous plant, with the conviction that he could still win the war." Hitler ponders an autumn offensive in the West. His generals would prefer to use their last forces to defend themselves in the East against the Russians. But does anyone still dare challenge the Führer? Hitler's objective is to take the port of Antwerp and cut off the British forces to the north and the Americans to the south. He will cross the Ardennes forest, like he did in 1940, which brought him victory over France. On December 10, 1944, Hitler goes up to the Eagle's Nest to tap into the spirit of this victory and find perspective. This is the twilight of the gods for the Third Reich, fighting on 5 fronts with the entire world as its enemy. The Führer's entourage helplessly witnesses his nervous decay. Yet his confidence remained. A secretary wrote, "He was possessed by the conviction that he could achieve his goals through will alone." On December 16, 1944, Hitler launches his last armored divisions in fighting condition. The troops are increasingly young. This is a last-chance offensive, led by loyalists like SS General Sepp Dietrich, who remains quite skeptical. He says, "I only had 4 days to prepare the offensive, instead of 4 weeks. The terrain chosen is the worst kind for our tanks." The news of this unexpected German strike creates panic from Brussels to Paris, liberated 4 months earlier. The exodus begins again with this phrase, repeated everywhere: "They're coming back! They're coming back!" As Germans rapidly advance through Belgium, they take many American prisoners who thought the war was won and are preparing for the holiday season. In Malmedy, the day after the attack, 84 American prisoners are shot by SS men who have already committed crimes on the Eastern Front. But the Germans won't get much further. Blocked by the lack of fuel, the Allied Air Force fighters, and the tanks, artillery, and determination of General Patton's men. Hitler faces reality. The Battle of the Bulge is lost. It has cost him 100,000 men, dead, wounded, or captured. In the east, moving through Poland, the Red Army launches an assault on Berlin, 300 miles away. Rokossovsky, Zhukov, and Konev's tanks approach the border of the Reich. The Russians meet with desperate German resistance. Women are the first victims of the men's brutality. Historians believe that some 2 million German women were raped, with many suffering multiple attacks. In Berlin alone, in 1945, more than 7,000 German women committed suicide. The German news interviews women to rally resistance. They didn't even spare my 60-year-old mother. They raped her like animals. And you too? Asks a reporter. Yes. And my sister and mother were abused in a bestial, animal manner. Since the beginning of their offensive, the Russians have liberated the Nazi death camps. Children in this camp have managed to survive, hidden in an underground cache. They are surrounded by hundreds of corpses. In the face of the Soviet advance, Himmler has ordered the destruction of all evidence of extermination. But he wants to hold on to the slave labor and transfers the deportees to camps inside Germany. On January 16, 1945, Hitler returns to Berlin. The sight before him is indescribable. The city has been devastated by bombings, leaving 1 million people homeless. Hitler hides out in his bunker, buried under the gardens of the new chancellery. The entrance is marked by 2 ventilation towers, connected to generators. The staircase leads 50 feet underground to a hallway with shared toilets and showers. Smoking is of course forbidden. Then there's a kitchen, storage rooms for food and weapons, and lodgings for the guards with emergency oxygen everywhere. Perfected communications are installed next to the doctor's office, where the infamous Dr. Morell continues to inject Hitler with whatever medicines he can still find. He treats the Führer for tremors now believed to have been symptomatic of Parkinson's disease. Goebbels and his wife Magda sleep with their 6 children, whom they will kill on the last day before committing suicide themselves. There's a hallway for generals and dignitaries waiting to enter a small meeting room where Hitler strategizes with phantom divisions and dead armies. The office of the indispensable Bormann is next to Hitler's living room, with the famous portrait of Frederick the Great. Gerda Christian, the secretary, says of this painting, "It always felt like he was judging you harshly with his huge eyes." Hitler hung his portrait there as a historical example because he saved Prussia at the last moment. Hitler's room, where his dog Blondie sleeps next to him, with a small statuette of Eva Braun, who won't join him until April. She will have her own room and walk-in closet, but will suffer from the suffocating stench of the toilets, sweat, boots, gasoline, and tobacco, now authorized by Hitler, along with liquor. Right next door is the dormitory of the secretaries, who must remain at the Führer's disposal night and day, despite the bombings regularly felt, even underground. One of these secretaries, Junge, recalls, "Every time a bomb fell, the bunker shook and the electric light flickered. Hitler would say, 'This time the bomb could have hit us.' His face was pale, his expression tense. Hitler was afraid." On April 23rd, while Zhukov and Konyev's armies advanced through the capital, Eva Braun manages to get a last letter to her sister Gretel. She writes, "Our end can come any minute, but naturally we do not intend to let ourselves be captured alive." Where could Hitler be hiding? On April 25, 1945, his mountain retreats are bombed by Allied planes. The Berghof, the Führer's beloved Berghof, is now in ruins. The great bay from which he dominated the world is in American hands. Still, on April 25th, Hitler's final blow comes when Russian and American forces converge. The war correspondents are delighted, like Lee Miller, special correspondent for American fashion magazine Vogue, overwhelmed by the Soviet female soldiers. Another famous Red Army reporter, Roman Karman, films Berlin, completely surrounded, with the Russians advancing. The inescapable countdown continues. Hitler learns of his friend Mussolini's violent death in northern Italy. Executed by partisans, his body was trampled by the crowd, then hung by his feet. Hitler says, "I do not want to fall into enemy hands, dead or alive. After my death, my body must be burned and remain hidden forever." In Berlin, during the night of April 28th, Hitler has a terrified city official dragged to his bunker to officiate his marriage to Eva Braun. She has finally gotten what she always wanted. Amidst the chaos, Hitler learns that the man he considered closest to him, Himmler, is trying to negotiate with the Allies. Concerned that Himmler might try to hand him over alive as a bargaining chip, Hitler takes it out on his representative, SS General Fegelein, whom he had married a year earlier to Gretel Braun. He has Fegelein shot. Hitler still has this power, even though the Russians are less than a quarter of a mile from the bunker. Hitler is suspicious of the cyanide Himmler has given him. Maybe it won't work. He tests it on his dog Blondie, whom he has buried in a shell hole. Then, just before midnight, he dictates his will to his secretary, Junge. He proclaims, "I die with a happy heart. I charge the leadership of the nation with the meticulous observance of the race laws and the merciless resistance to the universal poisoner of all peoples, the international Jewry." On April 30th, 1945, the Russians are at the Brandenburg Gate. General Weidling tells Hitler there is no more hope. Hitler gives the final order of his life to those still with him. He says, "Try to leave the bunker. Continue the fight in the woods." At 3:30 p.m., Hitler shoots himself in the head. Eva Braun chooses cyanide. She says to her secretary, "I prefer poison. I want to be a pretty corpse." In front of the entrance of the bunker, the Russians discover the jerry cans of gasoline that were used to burn the bodies of Hitler and Eva Braun, and partially those of the Goebbels, identified by SS officer Linge, Hitler's valet. There wasn't enough gasoline to burn the bodies of Goebbels' 6 children, murdered by their parents. For some time during the Cold War, Stalin will spread the rumor that Hitler had escaped, but the latest analyses prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was indeed dead. The Russians descend into the bunker, ransacked by the SS guards before their escape. Hitler gave them orders. "Everything must be burned immediately. Everything in my steel cabinets. Destroy everything. You hear me? Everything." On May 1st, 1945, German radio broadcasts this statement: "Our Führer Adolf Hitler has fallen, fighting to the last breath against Bolshevism." On May 3rd, 1945, Hitler's victor, Soviet Marshal Georgy Zhukov, prepares for a momentous event. He is about to enter the Reich Chancellery. In Hitler's office, he discovers the globe that Chaplin had parodied in his film The Great Dictator. Hitler caused 60 million deaths. But what became of Hitler's accomplices? Some would be sentenced to death by hanging. Himmler, the head of the SS, committed suicide. Goering, head of the Air Force, committed suicide to avoid being hanged at the Nuremberg trials. Ribbentrop, the foreign minister, was sentenced to death by hanging. Keitel, chief of staff, hanged. His deputy, Jodl, hanged. Speer, minister of armament, 20 years in prison. Field Marshal von Manstein, 18 years in prison. Sepp Dietrich, SS general, sentenced to 25 years. Leon de Grelle, the Belgian SS, died in exile in Malaga at almost 90. Eva Braun's parents and her sister Gretel died in their beds, like Hitler's secretaries. And Morrell, Hitler's doctor, died in hospital in 1948, suffering from heart and kidney problems.